Hello everyone, my name is Armando Azua-Bustos. I'm a Chilean scientist working in Spain. I consider myself to be an astrobiologist.
What is astrobiology?
Well, astrobiology is a quite recent field of research and is concerned of trying to understand the origin of life on Earth and the possibility of finding life elsewhere in the universe. And in my case, since we are looking for water as a proxy of finding life on Mars and other places of the solar system and beyond, I'm trying to understand the close and intimate relationship between water and life in order to understand not only life on Earth, but the possibility of finding life elsewhere by looking by water.
How do you conduct your research?
Well, I try to understand the possibility of finding life on Mars. And since I do not have the $3.5 billion in order to send my own robot to Mars, what I do is I try to study the environment on Earth that most closely resembles the condition of Mars. In my case, I have been studying the Atacama Desert in Chile, since it's the oldest and driest desert on Earth and a well-recognized Mars analog model.
How did you get into this topic?
Well, I have an interesting story behind that because when I got my first academic degree, I went into winemaking. I had a Bachelor of Science in winemaking, so I started as a winemaker. But after working a short time in that field, I realized that I like science much better, so I came back to study. I got three other academic degrees, and I had that unique advantage that I was born and raised in the Atacama Desert. So when in 2003 NASA proposed that Atacama was a proper analog model of Mars, I detected that I had an advantage there because I knew this desert very well. And now I'm studying all those same sites that by my memory, I do remember seeing interesting facts or interesting things that I'm now getting back in order to discover it again, but from the point of view of science. And actually, when I left the desert, since I lived in a small mining town, I had to leave that city in order to get to the college. I remember seeing from the window plane and thinking, well, I will never come back here because there's nothing to do. And years later, only I'm thinking exactly the opposite. Every time I can, I come back to the desert because there is so much to do.
How was it growing up in a desert?
That explains part of my story because on those years there wasn't much to do except explore Atacama. So in those times we have only two channels, TV channels, and so most of the weekends my parents would take us roaming the desert, everything from following Inca trails, finding fossils, taking our telescope at night. So from very little I developed this love of an explorer. And then when I was able to drive myself, I would go with my friends to do the same thing. And some way, I turned that hobby into a profession. So for other they call it work. In my case, I have very much a lot of fun with it.
What is the most fascinating aspect of the Atacama Desert?
The fact that life is able to endure even the most extreme conditions. You would say that even the driest places, you will see a picture of this place and you say how is possible that anything would be able to live here. But if you know where to look for, you will find one or two of these different life forms, and you wonder how is that is possible. It's the way that life is able to adapt to the most extreme conditions that is fascinating in the case of the Atacama.
The Atacama Desert is also a very important place for research, right?
Well, it's also fascinating that in the Atacama you have the biggest telescope on Earth, and is by 2030, 70% of the biggest telescope on Earth will be located in the Atacama because it is due clear skies. You don't have very little water in the atmosphere, so that's a huge advantage. You don't have almost no clouds in those areas, so that's the place that you wanna have your telescope, your very expensive telescope. So it's incredible that from that same place, people that is looking up in order to find the answer, are we alone? I'm doing exactly the same, but looking down to the soil, trying to solve that same answer.
What is life?
There has been entire conferences trying to define a common definition of what is life, and it has been achieved. amazingly, even a small child can recognize what is a living thing and what is not. But we have not able to come up with a definition, a universal accepted definition of what is life.
What did you discover?
What I have found is that life is able to adapt to the most extreme conditions of the Atacama in terms of UV radiation, in terms of desiccation. So I have discovered a number of different new microbial species and also a few plants that are able to live with very little amounts of water. Incredibly, one of these very dry places, which we reported that it was as dry as Mars, even in that place we have found a number of different microorganisms, which suggests that from the point of view of water availability, you shouldn't have any problem in detecting life on Mars.
Why is it this way?
That we don't know. We still don't know how it's possible that these life forms are able to survive with such little water. Actually, I'm writing an entire research proposal in order to understand what are the molecular mechanisms that explain that these life forms, microbial life forms, are able to tolerate such low condition of water availability and how they are able to endure that particular condition.
What is the most relevant question you have right now?
The question that I have now is that, well, since the Atacama is the driest and oldest desert on Earth, it is interesting from the point of view of evolution, life always had the same selecting pressure in order to be very efficient in the capture, retention, and use of water in order to survive. So we now think that most life on Earth, when confronted to desiccation, they will either die or enter in some mode of waiting, a mode of stasis, waiting for better conditions in order to reassume growth and metabolisms. But in the case of the Atacama, and this is the research that I'm not proposing, I'm now doing now, well, I am saying, well, maybe in the Atacama, that the life forms that are able to live there already adapted to that, and are adapted to live with very little, if no water at all. And that would change the definition of life on Earth, because with all life on Earth depends on water. This is related to water. And I have preliminary evidences of microorganisms on the Atacama that some of its biochemical functions are still to go on without no water at all, or almost no water at all. So the big question that I have now is life able to get at some point independent of the presence of water? That's my main question now.
And what is the challenge here?
The challenge here is both intellectual and from the method. Because the common paradigm now, the actual paradigm that is from the scientific community, is that life either dies or enters in some form of rest in order to wait for better conditions in terms of water availability. So you should not see any metabolic activity in the desiccated state. Okay? So first you have to think really well about the experiment you have to undertake in order to prove, given no reason that your experiments have not been well done, in order to really prove that you are really seeing some type of life form that is able to grow and still do metabolic metabolic activity in the desiccated state. It's like proving, it's like showing you have a dancing mummy. You know, mummies that are able to walk and talk and go around. It's the same intellectual challenge in trying to convince a community that is saying you should not have any activity in the desiccated state. I'm proposing exactly the opposite. It seems that here in the Atacama, for the given reasons, I do expect to have active metabolisms and life is still going on without almost no water at all.
What could this research mean for our future?
Of course, there's a basic idea on how to understand the close relation between water and life in using these kind of microorganisms. But you may also think about the potential applications or understanding that kind of a tolerance. We do know, for example, that some of the genes we have already discovered. Some people have worked with similar genes of other desert species, much wetter desert in this case, and they have transferred just one gene from for example, to a tobacco plant, And now you can, instead of irrigating that plant every day, you can irrigate it every week, and the plant will be just fine. So it has a huge implication on developing new crop species that are highly tolerant to desiccation. So having that kind of species that require much less water in order to survive, that would be a great advancement for science and for humanity.
So your work could influence agriculture on Earth, but you are also researching how to grow plants outside our planet, right?
You may remember this movie, The Martian, where Matt Damon grows potatoes in Mars. Well, we actually don't have any experience on that. So we're trying to send along with NASA a small greenhouse to Mars in order to grow the first plant outside Earth. The idea is to bring seeds to Mars in a closed small greenhouse in order to see if you germinate those seeds on Mars, adding a little water in that closed container. They will germinate as well as they would do on Earth, thinking that on Mars you will have less gravity, thinking that on Mars you have much more radiation. So we're doing those very preliminary experiments in thinking about human colonization on Mars and also on the Moon.
Would you like to go to Mars?
No, not yet. It's quite dangerous. We are just still developing. I mean, only 1/3 of whatever you send to Mars arrives there. So it's quite dangerous yet. Maybe in 50 years, if you have at least a 50% chance of coming back alive, then it will be interesting in going to Mars. But for now, it's just too dangerous.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I see myself as an expert in my field, and I see myself already have sent a few things outside Earth, both to the International Space Station, maybe Mars, maybe the Moon.
Where do you see humanity in 100 years?
I see humanity hopefully as a wiser species. We are just learning all the damage we have done to our planet. I hope that in 100 years, that again is a lesson already learned.
What does it mean to you to be a scientist?
It is an important role because we are producing new knowledge. Knowledge has no value if you don't share it. So, from my point of view, scientists should be very humble and be always available to share what they have learned with others.
You wrote a children's book called Are We Alone? Why did you write it?
Because I detected that there was no book on astrobiology for children. Amazingly, since this is a field that has many researchers, no one tried to close that bridge in order to get astrobiology to be a well-known term as biology, as chemistry, as physics. So the next generation do know about astrobiology being a proper field of science. That's what I did.
Why is it important to write for children?
I was inspired by Jacques Cousteau, by Carl Sagan and others in the joy of discovery, in the joy of learning new things. So what I'm trying to actively do is try to talk with the children from very young ages to college students on the joy of learning new things, because that can only be positive for you, independent of where you go into science or you go into the humanities or when you go into art. That drive in order to better yourself, in order to do things and contribute to humanity, that's very valuable.
Are we alone?
Well, you must consider that just in the close vicinity of the sun, in the close vicinity, like in your own neighborhood, we have detected almost, now up to date, it's like almost 4,000 different planets, and just that's in the close vicinity of the sun. And it has been estimated that in our galaxy alone, there should be more than 1 billion planets, 1 billion planets. And from that fraction, there should be like at least 100,000 inhabited planets. So if life has been able to adapt to so many different conditions on Earth, it wouldn't surprise me that would be the same case in other places of the solar system and beyond. So are we alone? I'm positively certain that we are not alone.
What would you like the world knows more about Atacama?
Well, what I'm trying to do now is trying to change the view of the Atacama as a sterile, interesting place, because even the definition of desert it says that there is nothing much interesting to see. If you go to a party that there is no one around, that things are very boring, you say, well, this party looks like a desert. Well, I'm trying to change that definition, that deserts are as interesting places as jungles, but you have to be more subtle in the way you look in order to find the interesting things that are happening in deserts.
What does it mean to look at sky in the darkness in Atacama?
Well, it's amazing because since in Atacama the skies are so clear and there's many places where you don't have any light pollution. I have remember walking in the Atacama in a moonless night and having seen my shadow produced by the light of the stars, star shadow. That is amazing. I don't see there is many places in the world you can see that star shadow.
It sounds incredible. What do you miss when you are not there?
I miss the wind. I miss this amazing landscape that remind you of your lone place in the universe.
Why do humans look for other places?
Well, that is inherited in ourselves, in all of us. Human, the explorer. Even me or you, if you see a small hill, you felt compelled to go up into that little hill to see around. If you are around the corner, you will feel compelled to see what is in the other side. We are by nature explorers. So now that we have explored most all of the places that we can explore on Earth, we're now looking abroad. This is built in ourselves. We want to see what is in the other side.
What kind of society do you dream of?
A more kind society. Kind. We have to be kinder with each other. I am a scientist, but I'm also a Christian. So the principle that guides Christianity and all the good religion is to be better with the people around. This is very simple. I always tell my students this: try to do something good for anyone at least once a day. If you do that, calculate how many good things you have done by the end of the week, by the end of the month, by the end of the year, by the end of the decade, and by the end of your life. When you do that, and if you do that, you can go to the other side, whatever that other side, with pride.
What motivates you?
When you say what motivates you, you have to define that motivation in order to drive you forward. But I don't need such motivation because I have so much fun with what I do. I enjoy so much what I do that I don't need a motivation. You know what I mean?
It's great.
I do have a lot of fun with what I do, so I do not need such motivation.
Is there something that you would like to change if you had the possibility?
That's a very interesting question. I will think about that until next day. I would come back to the point where hominids were evolving in order to remove the tendency to violence in the Homo sapiens. That I would do. That would solve so many things.
Do you have a dream?
A dream? Just to be happier. Simple.
Thank you so much, Armando.
Thank you.